I'm Jim Check.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot, the best political commentary. No new show on the internet by far. Nothing even comes close. And we got lots to talk about again today. But Renee Merrifield, former MLA here in British Columbia, and the lost decade, the NDP in power for just about that time. And Ian and I joke a lot on the really big show, and we say that a comet must have hit Canada around 2015 because a lot of bad things have happened since 2015. And the comet must have kind of like flowed over here into British Columbia because a lost decade. It's crazy, you know, the amount of GDP growth, right? GDP growth per capita in BC. We can put up that chart if you can so that we can look at that. And there you go.
Yeah, and I do think this is really important. You know, I have a lot of friends, family, individuals that I talk to, strangers on airplanes and on trains that talk to me about how hard things are right now. And, you know, it is hard. It's really hard because people are earning less and their dollars are going less far, and there are more issues that they are having to grapple with. I thought that the Fraser Institute did an amazing job on their article about why they're considering this the lost decade. You know, the Hub did another article about the 7 charts that show how bad things are in BC. This is real, and finally, the charts are showing what people are already feeling. That, you know, our legislators in Victoria have made it much more difficult for people to get ahead, much more difficult for people to make ends meet, and much more difficult for people to find jobs, which is why we are, for the first time, you know, in 30 years, suffering with a negative population growth.
And it's like, you and I talk a lot about British Columbia. Like, I don't know what wins they can point to. Like, I mean, it seems like, you know, like healthcare, we've seen the crisis, and you were one of the first to alert this, and the pediatric crisis here in Kelowna, in KGH. Pediatric crisis where we had, you know, like all the pediatricians that refused to work in KGH, and then in Kamloops with the OBGYNs, and then in Vernon with the psychiatric, and then and just on and on and on. And then the closures, the ER closures, one after another. It seems like we do a story every week on an ER closure. Healthcare, an absolute crisis here in British Columbia. That's just one of the things.
And, you know, we're starting to see these organizations and organizers taking to the, you know, social media, to the advertisements. I mean, anyone who's been in Kelowna Airport lately will see, you know, the billboard that actually talks like it's the specialists of BC that are saying how long people are waiting for different surgeries. We know that there would be different outcomes if there were more timely healthcare being delivered here in BC. But Jim, you know, the first part of your point is well taken. Which part of any of the things that the provincial government oversees right now is doing better? Which, you know, I had one of the social needs providers, you know, in my office this morning, and they are the first to say that things are not going well, that they are managing and mitigating, you know, different symptoms of the outcome, but that they are not getting to the cause, and they are very far from the cure. So, you know, we look at whichever social ills, whether it's crime on our streets, whether it's our healthcare system, whether it's our GDP per capita, there is not a single thing that is going well. And in fact, our economy is sliding further and further behind, and our industries are taking it on the chin. There is not a single person that isn't sounding the alarm bell on a file right now, and including the Indigenous and where we're at today, and all due to legislative changes that this government has made.
Talk about crime and safety. Decriminalization, I mean, in EB's own words, it was a failed project. But look what it did to British Columbia. Look what it did to British Columbia. Look at the homelessness in the streets. Look at the crime in British Columbia. And we just had you know, something happening in northern BC there with, you know, that made international news. Like so many things in the crime and safety, and a Surrey mayor coming out and asking for a state of emergency because of extortion and the crime that is rampant here in British Columbia. And I had MLA Macklin McCall on, a former RCMP officer, you know, like talking about the obvious, and we're going to do more committees. It's just like we seem to be stuck in committees and not getting anything done. And crime and safety is obviously paramount for so many people. I think we did the story just recently. Over half of British Columbians live in fear. Live in fear. I think you and I talked about it last time. That was a theme of our show. Live in fear. Over half of British Columbians live in fear in British Columbia.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, and I think there was an excellent clip from Rob Shaw's panel that he did at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, and it was playing on social media channels. If you haven't seen it already, please take a look at it. But it was great because he basically diagnosed where the NDP are at right now. And I think that the question or the prompt was, do you think there's going to be a spring election or an election this year? And he said they would be foolish to call an election because there's not a single file that is going well for them right now. And furthermore, and now, so this is Rob Shaw. This is someone who is a journalist and he's part of the press gallery. He's someone who sits inside question period on a daily basis and sits inside the Legislative Assembly as, debates are going on. And his comment was then, the laws that they are doing right now are basically to unwind things that they put into place back 10, 7, 8, 6 years ago. And furthermore, the financial picture keeps falling and failing and falling farther and farther behind. I thought he was very eloquent as to how he put it. I was surprised that he was as critical of this government as he was, but it does show where we're at today.
I mean, the good thing about British Columbia and the media is that there is a few independent journalists in British Columbia that do the work that still have access, where the Liberals have really cordoned off access. They use the CBC as a shield and CTV to kind of shield them and say, oh, we do respond with media, but it's the media that's very friendly. They don't take questions from independent media outlets or independent media like Rob Shaw on that, and they insulate themselves from tough questions, whereas the NDP definitely, they're less reluctant, but I've gotten interviews with the Premier and with Brendan Bailey a couple of times. It's hard, but it's definitely doable here in British Columbia. So, I mean, on that count, I would say they haven't cordoned it off as well as the Liberals have, and we need to hold them accountable. So kudos to people like Rob Shaw and them doing that hard work.
Yeah. And I would also give kudos to Yvonne Palmer. Penny Daflos has really been on the medical aspect. Andrea Wu, again, Globe and Mail, and definitely broke the entire cancer story and the 2 wait lists. And in doing so, she actually transformed and changed. And I wrote her a quick email just to congratulate her on the stories that she broke a year earlier were actually helping to change how the trajectory of healthcare was being undertaken. We do need that independent media. Jim, you have been so faithful on this cry for independent media that is not paid for by government, that can actually hold government to account. Right now, government is broken, and we are seeing the Supreme Court decision that we're expecting in the next couple of months on the whole conflict of interest and the ethics commissions and giving some more teeth. And that'll be really interesting because, again, the justice that made that decision said, we've lost the accountability for our politicians. And that's been something that you've been saying, and one of the reasons that we need independent media.
And the big one, and you're in the business world, is certainty for investors, right? The investors, and that's this bar chart here really represents that certainty in investment. And right now we don't have it with DRIPA, like David Eby basically, he's been accused of actually running that out of his own office there and in the darkness as well. And some of the decisions that have come down have really hurt British Columbia, even including people just like regular people buying residential properties have said, I'm going to pause on BC till this gets straightened out. How do we get back to certainty here in British Columbia?
Well, I'll remind all of those that are listening, you see this chart in the 1990s was the lost decade. The 1990s, right after that in 2001, there was a really extreme government shift. And by 2003, our economy had completely turned around. By 2012, we had the best healthcare system in Canada. We were touted as the best outcomes with the best access and the best results that were being delivered. We had an economy that was firing on all cylinders and was really on a positive trajectory. Did things get overheated? Probably. There were some brakes that were put on towards the end of the BC Liberal, oversight. But here we are again in the 2020s with another lost decade that I would probably argue started in 2017. And once you have, you go from a $2 billion surplus and you start sliding, it's very difficult, but it is doable. But it's going to require political will in order to change that trajectory. Really interesting to see what Brenda Bailey does with the budget coming out today. Will it be an austerity budget where she's going to start firing on all cylinders and bringing back the economy? My doubt is that, or my speculation is that she's going to deliver a larger deficit.
I mean, to be fair to David Eby and the NDP, some of this was brought onto them by federal policy, including immigration. When I interviewed him, he said that the immigration policy was daft. And a lot of that immigration, that rampant immigration in Canada, hurt our access to healthcare, hurt our inflation in housing and food and all kinds of things. And I mean, but he wasn't very vocal on it, though, when it was happening, right? I mean, they were basically complicit while it was happening. And then if we talk about climate change, they bought into that whole climate cult as well. And, like when talking about forestry, how many interviews has this outlet done on forestry here? And you and I have talked about forestry at length. And we still haven't fixed the number one thing they complained about far before Trump, and that's fiber. Again, they said they're going to do a committee. And then the committee, when they talk about the committee, the industry says, well, there's not enough representation from industry. And it seems like access to fiber doesn't get solved. And that's that certainty. Like, why would Canfor invest here when it can go somewhere else and get more certainty?
No, money is a coward, and it's going to go to the path of least resistance. And right now, that is not BC. BC is full of resistance in the bureaucracy, in the layering effect of all of the different legislative changes, and in the regulations and the regulatory burden by businesses here in BC. And you talked about Clean BC and the disaster that it was, and how they're kind of like pulling back from Clean BC. I was in committee stage and debated this, whether it was Clean BC or whether it was the budget on Clean BC, and it was a disaster. And by their own numbers, when the NDP actually came up with the financial modeling and the financial mapping, their own numbers showed how devastating it was going to be to industry and how big of a hole it was going to put in our economy. This is their own numbers that were being created. And instead of actually heeding this as a warning, the minister over and over and over again would respond and by saying, no, that was without any of the mitigation effects that we were putting in. That's not without the green economy, et cetera, et cetera. BC Business Council under David Williamson and Ken Peacock actually did a really great job of itemizing what that looked like and taking the NDP financial model and modeling that out into the individual industries. And Jim, the note that you just made about the lack of fiber and how it was going to affect the lumber industry is repeated in every single industry by some of the, whether it's housing was going to feel this drag effect of the step code 1, 2, and 3, and we were going to see the increase in the housing costs, and the minister confirmed that, or whether it was the mining industry and the environmental restraints that were going to be put onto it, or the LNG, oil and gas, and what was going to happen to it. So, I mean, across the board, every industry was going to feel it. And I believe that the reason that the premier did not come out stronger in terms of the immigration policies was because it was the only thing that was propping up the economy. Simply more people, more bodies spending a little bit more money, rather than looking at what that was doing to the per capita GDP, which was absolutely in a tailspin downward.
Do you think, like, in this lost decade here, is a lot of it to do with what Chrystia Freeland accused the Trudeau Liberals of, is virtue signaling and identity politics? Is that what got in the way of actual, like, real meat and potatoes and stoking this economy?
I would take it one step further, and I would say it's ideological. It's based on their belief system, and the ideology trumps the economy. The ideology trumps safety. The ideology trumps the rights of its citizens. And whether that's the crime, the decriminalization. I mean, decriminalization was literally taking one tiny aspect of a very, very successful system and pulling that outside of it because it fit the ideology, but the other part of the system did not fit the ideology, and trying to use that. And instead, it was such a failed experiment that everyone can acknowledge now, but the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, have you seen less drugs on our street? I mean, I walk the downtown streets on a daily basis because that's where I work, and I can tell you, I have not seen a decrease in any of the drug use on the actual streets. And I have to say, like, this is ideology on display. And whether it's the indigenous rights and reconciliation and the huge step backwards that we've taken with the Cowichan and the Gatla decisions, we are in precarious times right now. And this is the ideology come to roost. And these are the laws that were put into place that are actually having their effect now. And we have to take heed and figure out what we're going to do next.
They should make the politicians walk to work at 3 a.m. down streets like East Hastings and then see if they're comfortable without police, though, by themselves every day. And I bet you they figured out ways to make it better, because places like Tokyo have figured it out. Yet we continue to just stand at the podium and blame somebody else for stuff that's going on here.
And I'll say it again, Jim, I love what you just brought up about Tokyo. Anyone who has traveled internationally will know it does not have to be this way. It does not have to be. Our streets do not have to look the way they look. They do not have to be as crime riddled as they are. They do not have to. We don't have to live like this. Our healthcare system does not have to be like this. There are different ways to do it, and there are better ways to do it. And other countries, we don't even have to invent them. We just have to follow suit with some of the best practices around the world.
I think access to politicians would help a lot, because they do court. It's tough to get at them because this BC Ferries thing has not been explored enough, because again, it is restricted access where we get a few minutes, and it's just not enough time, because if they're held accountable, they'll make better decisions for the rest of the people in the province here. And I think sometimes they're reporting to somebody else as opposed to the electorate, and that's the weird part there. And
well,
I don't want. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there was an interview that was done with Sam Cooper, and it was on social media this last weekend. So feel free to go and check it out. But he identified two of our leaders. One was Carney, and the other was Eby. Two of our leaders that were really beholden to the Chinese government. It's not maybe lost on me that those are also the two leaders that seem to be giving large contracts, seem to be really stoking the fire of trade allyship, etc. And what came to my mind as I watched the interview with Sam Cooper was, oh my goodness, is this why the BC Ferries contract went to the Chinese government? Is this why they get $4 billion of our dollars and $1 billion of the federal dollars to actually build these ferries and these pieces of infrastructure for us?
So Brenda Bailey his budget's coming out today. I don't know what time the press conference is, but the budget's going to be released today. But 2 weeks ago, they were telegraphing that this was going to be a tough budget and that she'd be the most hated person in BC. And then she kind of pulled back a bit on it. And then, yesterday when she did a press conference, then, it doesn't seem like much is going to change. There's not going to be any real cuts. And Peter Millibar was, highlighting this and just talk tough. And then what, did she get a couple phone calls from a few of the unions and say, you better not? And all of a sudden it's just walked right back.
Well, and I really thought that she was, and I guess it was similar to Carney, when, and that's what kind of tweaked me, was that I was like, oh, okay, wait, she's saying no cuts, no further taxation. So what she's talking about, she's preparing us for deficit. And that's exactly what Carney did. He said, it's going to be really tough. This is going to be really difficult. Well, there were no tax cuts, and there was no real further taxation. It was really that he was going to run a $70 billion deficit. I am very fearful about what's going to happen. The process for the budget is that everyone was in lockup this morning. They got access to it first, and then they'll be announced this afternoon with a press conference right afterwards. So Brenda will deliver the budget to the House this afternoon. It will start probably around 1:30ish or closer to 2 maybe after a question period, and then it'll be put out.
Yeah, I mean, and the big thing is how do you get investment? Because BC should have tons of investment. I mean, that should be the main driver. And when I did interview Brenda Bailey, I asked her, I said, I gave the example of what they're doing in Alaska there for a Canadian company. They're actually building them a road, a 200-mile road, and so you can pay it for later in tolls. They didn't have to put up any money just so they could get access to that mine. I said, would British Columbia do the same thing for the miners here? And she said, absolutely. I've yet to see it. I can continue to hear shovel ready, shovel ready. When will the shovels hit the ground is the question.
I have not seen the BC government deliver any infrastructure for any major project yet. So I would say, like, believe what a politician does, not what they say, because I have not seen that. That would be shocking to me. And I would say that this BC government has proven to make it even more difficult, saying no, the projects have to actually bring the infrastructure. If you look at the LNG project, I mean, they spent over $4 billion on their infrastructure alone. And that included bringing BC Hydro to the property because they didn't have enough electricity. Now that only supplied phase one, and phase two they had put in a proposal to do it on natural gas, to which the environmental assessment said no, you have to do it on hydro. So that was almost dead in the water before they even started. And this government has over and over and over again said that all new LNG projects have to be delivered at net zero. I don't know how an LNG project delivers at net zero. So this is going to be really interesting. And I would say that is maybe a little untruth, that what Brenda said is what will happen, because I don't see this government putting in massive amounts of infrastructure. But I do see the US government, whether it's states, whether it's feds, putting in massive, massive incentives for companies to go there. I said earlier, money is a coward. It goes with the path of least resistance, and right now it's going into the U.S., into private companies in droves. And the prime minister would know this because he sent his own company there.
Well, CTV did a story, I think it was yesterday. The number one concern, according to a recent poll for people, no surprise, is food inflation. Like food inflation. Like that's the thing. And Canada, a number just came out today. And like it went up from where it was at 6.5, the highest in the G7, to 7.3, to literally 7.3. Like it's out of control here in Canada, and a lot of this stuff is, again, they could fix it tomorrow. The food packaging tax seems simple, just stroke of a pen. Industrial carbon tax, the clean fuel regulations, and supply management, just and like that. What?
Yeah, Jim, I love that you brought up these points, because the food professor, if you don't follow him on X, please follow him. But, he put out a great tweet talking about the food inflation numbers and why it was this way. And he said, we don't have a, inflation issue. We have a structural issue.
Yeah. And a policy issue.
It's policy. It's built in. It's why we have the inflation that we do, and it's why the U.S. does not, and it's why Europe does not. And I challenge anyone: go to a European country, you will not see the same food inflation that we are suffering under. And I have to remind listeners: this is not like a one and done, 7.3% increase. This is on top of every other increase that we have seen. So the fact that we're going compounded. So the fact that you're going and, I just overheard, individuals speak, talking and saying that, beef is a luxury item. When did beef become a luxury item? But everything that we put into place with all the regulatory confines that we have helped to accelerate our inflation. And I also got into a little bit of a debate. I won't call it an argument, but a debate with someone the other day, where they were talking about why we needed to protect supply management. And they were saying in the negotiation with Kuzma, I really hope that they stay strong with supply management, because we need to protect our really great dairy. And I just said, CBC. With all due respect, I hope that it goes. And I said this, I said, right now I have friends that call cheese a luxury item, that can't afford to put any sort of dairy on their tables. And that, if I have to choose between, the horrible dairy of the US or the no dairy at all, I'm sorry, but I'm going to choose some dairy. I'm going to choose some poultry. I'm going to choose some amount of beef. And right now we have to figure out how we get those that supply management unwound, and at least our trade barriers opened up, and our interprovincial trade barriers, because we have those as well that help to exacerbate our food inflation.
The other one in Canada that drives costs is that we've allowed so many oligopolies here in Canada. And some of those are including the grocery stores. We have like 3 main players in Canada: Sobeys, Loblaws, Metro. Our airlines, we have 2 main airlines here in Canada: Air Canada, WestJet. Even some of these discount airlines coming in and they get squeezed out. They literally get squeezed out. They don't last very long. And then, our telecom system, like Rogers, Bell, Telus, and then our banking cartel. Our banking cartel is absolutely ridiculous. Like, people are still paying. If you're still paying fees on your banking, go to Wealthsimple. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. But all these cartels lead to higher costs. The supply management. When we vote, the elected representative represents the people. They don't represent cartels and oligopolies, but they seem to get, as soon as they get elected, they seem to divert their attention towards these oligopolies or these cartels. The dairy cartel was just in Parliament there, meeting with Mark Carney in the hallway. Amazing how they got a meeting with Mark Carney when I can't even get an email answered, but the dairy cartel gets in there and gets a meeting with Mark Carney, a private meeting in the hallway. Isn't that amazing? As a consumer, that should enrage you, because it's policies that benefit the few at the expense of the many. And if we're all voting, then just give the cartels the right to vote. And then we'll just take us out of the equation, because it seems useless for us to get to vote, and then all of a sudden the attention is shifted towards cartels or WHO, UN, whatever, all these globalists. We're going to talk about that in a second. But
yeah, and again, we need to take cues from countries that don't have the same issues that we do, and open up the markets. Really see the benefit to having open markets and ability to have that healthy competition to drive pricing down. It was interesting. I think it was Pierre Poilievre that recently just said, we produce more food. We produce, more food than we ever have per capita, and yet we have higher food inflation than we ever had. We need to ask why, and we need to really create the environment in which new markets can flourish, and we do not do that. In fact, we prop up those that are already there, and then some.
One of the comments is, if only we had a media outlet that would hold power to account, make us bigger that they can't ignore us, and demand that they answer to us, demand that they do interviews, demand that they come on and answer to the Canadian public. It is not, the CBC is not this bastion of like this social cohesion. You know what I mean? They will preach social cohesion versus democracy. You get one or the other. And the CBC promotes social cohesion, which means you shut up.
Yeah, and I would say that, media outlets just like Now Media are doing the work, and viewership. If you can share, subscribe, absolutely do so, because it is how your voice is heard. It's how you actually can start making things change, and the voice get louder.
We're gonna move on here.
I feel bad for you, Jim. You already did a 3-hour show this morning, so
that's okay. We're trying. We're doing the best. We're doing the best we can, and you are as well. Knowing that we report to the viewer, to the public, not to a cartel, and not to the Liberal Party. And somebody put out that our leader, I don't have a leader. Media's job, number one job, is to hold power to account. That is it. Like, if you go there to a press conference and say you got to jump, you say why, not how high. You say why, not how high. That's the job. That's the job. Yeah. So Mark Carney's speech at Davos, applauded by the pundits at CBC and CTV and Global and all the Liberal pundits out there, the ones that control the voice in Canada, as this great speech. Marco Rubio did a speech yesterday in Munich. I put them together so that you could, like, it's on our Now Media page there. I put them together so you could listen to the two of them together. And I'm going to play a small clip here. Can we play that small clip here of Rubio's speech here? I think it's important to play because it really has played into a lot of the politics in Canada here. Let's listen in on this.
with it an evil empire, and the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own.
That's good, Nim. That's good.
Anyone who hasn't seen the full speech, please, I urge you to watch it. It was actually incredibly powerful and incredibly true.
We do have it with this graphic on Now Media, and you can listen to Marco Rubio's speech and you can listen to Mark Carney's speech right after, and advise people to listen to them together. Listen to them together. And then ask yourself, who's the speech directed at? Who's the audience? And what is the policy that is kind of based in that speech? And I think that's the answer you'll find in those two speeches.
Yeah, and what I would also urge is, or what I found, I guess, refreshing is that Rubio's speech is a little bit more, I guess, palatable than maybe what we hear on a daily basis, hourly basis, sometimes minute by minute basis from his leader. And so without dancing into, all of the lack of decorum that his leader uses, this was really well spoken. It was very thoughtful. It was very resolved and reasoned, but it was also very, very warning and very, very threatening in terms of what he was saying could be the potential outcome. So I was really refreshed by what he was saying. It was a welcome to partnership. It was an understanding. It was almost like he put out all of the terms of partnership and what it looked like. And I thought, wow, if anyone can criticize this, it's going to be hard pressed.
So Rubio's speech spoke to the electorate, the people that voted for the American people. It spoke to them, get their jobs back. Enough with the turning over power. Mark Carney's speech spoke to globalists about, like turning your power over of your sovereign nation to organizations as the WEF for climate change, all those different ideals, open borders. Globalism and liberalism kind of went together. And I watched a really good piece on it from a Chinese higher up that said, China took the best of globalism, but didn't take any of the liberalism. And it said, we're not going to do any of that stuff, but we'll take the best of globalism. And but Carney's still preaching globalism. He's still talking like he reports to the globalists. He's still talking like he reports to the WEF. It was Canadians that elected him. Canada should be first. One of the things that Rubio said in his speech was, your leader should put its nation first. Its nation first. Like, America will not look disapprovingly at a nation that puts its nation first. That's what's expected. We are not doing that. We are not doing that. You go listen to those two speeches and just put that frame in your head. Who is that speech for? Who is it speaking to? And who elected them? Because I don't think a globalist order elected Mark Carney. And why does he report to them?
Yeah, and what's really concerning is that there's still this elitism and ideology that believes it's like a higher way and a greater call. And I think that what Rubio did was kind of say, like, actually, is it? No, it's, you know, putting your people first is the higher call. That's the job of a leader. So I thought it was refreshing. I thought it was great that these speeches were so close together in terms of time frame. I love that they both got standing ovations. So, it wasn't just like, it wasn't just Carney getting a standing ovation. It was Rubio that also got the standing ovation, but it also had a tremendous strength. Rubio's speech it was compelling because it was visionary, yes, but it was also very strong, and said, hey, we can do this, but we're going to have to all invest in our own countries and our own country's strength. So it wasn't saying invest in the US's strength at the expense of your own. It was actually the opposite. We want you to be investing in your own strength, because that's what makes us all a stronger collective.
Yeah, he said that's what's expected from you. Do what's expected from you. Because again, the voter is the person that the elected official is supposed to report to. Not, I got elected, now I go and do all these things that I believe in, or these cartels, or these oligopolies want, or these other power, WHO or the UN and all these things. That's not who elected you. That's not who elected you. You don't think better. You still report to the electorate.
And if I full circle this to the court case that we're waiting on from the Supreme Court, I mean, one of the criticisms of our politicians is that they are beholden to certain special interest groups, that they are not threatened by, the Conflict of Interest Commission or the Ethics Commission that they are beholden to, because they are self-appointed. So it is like, this does kind of, say, like, okay, who is Carney beholden to? Who is he actually, being beholden to? What is going on, and how do we counter that? I think that's really important, and I think that these are big questions that we need to ask and answer. And I think that the court system is saying we need to make sure that the court remains a part of holding those politicians to account. And even the legislation that says that they can't be taken to court needs to be, really thought through in a more meaningful way.
If you don't do anything else today, go to our YouTube page, Now Media, and find this thumbnail and listen to both those speeches, and just listen carefully and listen to the words, because it's really important. I found that it was really, really important. And then this is another piece that came out. CTV put this piece out, and I put it on my LinkedIn. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Trump announces major climate rollback. So they rolled back almost everything, and including that, basically those emergency powers that were given. So basically this Endangerment Act, it's all been rolled back. So that's how they placed all the legislation underneath that. That's how they got it all through. So that's all been rolled back. I mean, industry in the United States is celebrating like crazy. And obviously, this will be tough for Mark Carney to push through his CCUS, which benefits Brookfield, and then ultimately Mark Carney. Brookfield, one of the massive, one of the big, well, it says on their website, the biggest investor in climate technologies is Brookfield. And a lot of that in jeopardy, because there's a lot of scientists now coming out, a lot of people pushing back on climate religion and the WEF, and saying that it really was a way for the world or these organizations to gain control over sovereign nations as well. So lots of pushback on it, and America rolling it back in so many different ways. And here's Canada pushing forward on it still, to the detriment. Look at our economy. Look at the resources that are trapped beneath our feet. Look at where we're at, the highest food inflation in the G7. I mean, and yet they'll stand up there and tell you we have the strongest economy in the G7. They'll, you know what I mean? And, like even David Eby says we have the strongest in the BC. I'm just like, how long will Canadians allow themselves to be gaslit when the actual reality is right there? The charts are like, I mean, we could probably spend the next 30 minutes. I can just roll charts.
Yeah,
And,
and that's a scary thing. I mean, we do have our, whether it's the Fraser Institute saying no, we're in the lost decade, or whether it's the McDonald Laurier Institute saying no, things are very bad, and here's why. The climate bureaucracy that we have embedded into our systems and structures and regulatory bodies has been so detrimental and so backwards in terms of really where we need to go as Canada and where we need to head as an energy giant. That we do need to give our heads a shake. And the U.S. is not the only one. Yes, the U.S. Everyone's loving to criticize the U.S. right now, but there are institutions and there are lots of bodies that are stepping back, from the climate frenzy and really taking a look and more sober look at at where we need to go as a globe and how we need to get there. And what Rubio says also is very true. Like, we're putting all of these restraints on ourselves. Meanwhile, China's building, and India's building in flagrant disregard to any of those aspects. And, I love the Greens who, really celebrate the fact that China has all these renewables. And I was like, man, put that against their coal use. Their coal use has gone through the roof. So it's just the fact that they're using more and more energy, like the fact that they're using any renewables is not cause for celebration. They're just running out of coal to actually get from everywhere. So, the fact that, they're using any renewables at all should not be celebrated. Their emissions have gone through the roof and continue to climb. But they are also building up their military. And, when Rubio says it's one of the largest military investments, we need to take heed, because they're building a military on coal. And meanwhile, we're putting all sorts of regulations on ourselves to hold ourselves back, and in doing so, we're weakening ourselves immensely.
I just want to say in the comments that our job in media is to hold power to account, and we'll always do it that way. We disapprove of any type of violence at all. Everybody has a right to live on this planet. Everybody has a right to speak. And we'll always stick up for everybody's freedom of expression, even if they're wrong. But we definitely deplore violence, and nobody should ever talk about violence. And not a good time. And but holding power to account, absolutely. Accountability and transparency is what's lacking here in Canada and in British Columbia. We have a person that's on our show, usually one of the commenters that said he's been to 50 different countries, and he says the media in Canada is a bigger problem. He said there's undemocratic countries in the world that have a better media than Canada. That is one of the bigger problems in Canada, is the media. The media does not hold them to account. And that's the big problem. Hold them to account. Like, all these things should be explored. Like food inflation, they talk around the edges, but they blame other countries. It's right there in black and white. The food packaging tax, the industrial carbon tax, the clean fuel regulations, supply management. How long did they lie to us about the carbon tax that doesn't add to inflation? How long have they told us? How long did they tell us that lie? How long did they say that to us?
Yeah, and I think it even goes further. If you look at the land supply, and how restricted that is, so that leasing rates are higher, so that only few stores can afford those leasing rates, so that and that all gets embedded into the cost of our goods and the cost of our food. Like, it's so systemic all the way across. And yeah, you're right. We were lied to. And I have to give credit where credit's due. Pierre Poilievre is the one who kept saying our carbon tax is contributing to inflation. And meanwhile, everyone's like, no. And here's some paid for by industry, reports that say no, it's otherwise. And when the carbon tax came off, it was the only relief that we saw, for a very short amount of time. But it was the only relief we saw. And now, our other systems are at work, and our other systems continue to contribute. And until we figure that out, and until we get rid of a government that continues to labor this on, we're not going to see a difference. We're not going to see change.
Weakness of leadership. We talk about it all the time, too. Weakness of leadership. And I saw $1.11 as I was driving in this morning. I think that was in the Mission somewhere. $1.11. I mean, in Kelowna. And I could tell inflation was going to come down. I mean, I'm an accountant as well, but it's obvious. If energy prices come down, which is an input into everything, literally moving my finger, takes energy. I have to eat something to move my finger. Energy is everything. The price of energy comes down, so will the cost of everything. And it has come down. But then we have all these other things that we layer on top of our food, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. Diesel is still $1.61 this morning. And what do we truck our goods across this nation with? Diesel. Trains burn diesel, trucks burn diesel, tractors burn diesel. Yet diesel has a higher carbon tax or clean fuel tax on it than anything else. It should be exempted. It should be exempted from all taxes. Just absolutely ludicrous. And they could do that overnight, and it would drop food inflation. They could do that literally overnight.
And the clean fuel aspect is so gamified. We pay exorbitant amounts to bring in, these cleaner fuels from Washington and Alberta, and in the end, it just costs us more money and ends up not doing what we think it's going to do. And ultimately, the test is, have our emissions gone down? And they have not. BC's emissions have gone steadily up every single year, year over year, save only in COVID, and that was because the world stopped. And even during COVID, our emissions went down less than the rest of Canada. So, we saw the boomerang effect right after everyone was released out of their homes and back into the workforce. The emissions continue to accelerate. So, the proof is in the pudding. All of these regulations that we're putting on ourselves, all of this cost that we're laboring on to the taxpayer, who is only one. There's one taxpayer, and that's us, you and me. And that, all of that is leading to this lack of affordability and high cost of living and, impoverishment that people are feeling and sensing. And, the only answer that Carney has for that right now was a $70 GST rebate to those that were, below the poverty line. Like, that is how ridiculous we are right now with our politicians. And it's up to us. If anything, I hope that this show shows you how, politics actually affects our daily life and what we can do about it. And that is get loud and noisy, support, media outlets like Now Media, and make sure that we take our democratic right really seriously and get out and vote when it comes time to actually change government. I believe we are going to have a federal election this year, and it's going to be a great opportunity for the Canadian electorate to get off our couches and make sure that we vote and tell this government how bad things are.
The GST idea that Mark Carney and Francois Philippe-Champagne have put out there, that GST break for the low-income people, the Romans did it. It's called bread and circuses. It's literally bread and circuses. You throw crumbs out to the people and then give them a bunch of circuses to kind of fight over, and it distracts them from what's really going on. It's an old con job, and they do it because it works. And they continue to do it. And we played a clip with Justin Trudeau. They use fear, which is the other thing the CBC does, ramps up fear where the Americans are going to attack us in the streets. Fear works as well. It gives them power. Stop living in fear. Demand accountability. Demand accountability. Like, share, subscribe. Get us out there. Give us a bigger audience so that they have to come on here. They have to come on here.
And the one thing that I would hope about, MP Giovanni's, trip down to the U.S. is that maybe the U.S. won't be so beholden to helping Carney get into power this time. My hope is that we actually see some shift in that government, because when you're down in the U.S., they do not have the same sentiment about Trump. They're not even fixated the way that Canada is fixated. And they certainly don't have media that are pumping what is happening on a daily basis in Trump's X account. So, I really hope that for all of us that, we can see past the fear that's being indoctrinated by our mainstream media, and really take to, getting our own information and understanding how policy is affecting our lives, and then making a difference when it comes time to vote.
I'm tempted to do a GoFundMe to see if we can get enough money together to coax Bev Turner from GB News to come and be our parliamentary reporter. Man, she would just rip them apart there. I mean, every other reporter would lose their mind, but I mean, she has international stature. She's interviewed the president recently as well. I mean, that's what we need. We need somebody that is not scared to go in there and just push their way in and not take no for an answer. And that's what Canada needs, is a reporter to show the rest of the reporters that it's not all about just gathering sausage rolls for yourself. I don't know if you remember this, the sausage roll
I
thing.
do. Oh my goodness, and one for you, and one for you. Yeah, the media maybe should have asked for something a little bit higher end, maybe sushi or something. But yeah, I mean, we're left with the manufactured, and I say manufactured not in a good way, like providing high-paying jobs, but in falsified press conferences and scenarios. You know, whether it was the house that wasn't real that Carney did his house announcement in front of, or whether it was the sausage rolls that was a completely manufactured sort of scenario. You know, we need to demand better from our politicians and really ask for them to be impacting our lives in a more meaningful way.
We do have one more to talk about here, and then at 1 o'clock, I'm going to interview Loyal Wooldridge here, a local city councilor, but we're going to put it on our new Kelowna channel, our Best of Kelowna. So we're going to get the Desert Fox to put that in the comments. So you're going to jump over there. It won't be on this station because we're going to try and keep this more to the Canadian landscape, British Columbia landscape. The last story, though, Liberal MP ousted by court. That was that Terrebonne riding. One vote decided the difference, and the Elections Canada had the vote that would have made it a tie. Yet, the Liberals never said, let's do a by-election. She never resigned and said, this is unfair. and it took the Elections Canada never said, oh, they're just like, oh, that's what it is what it is. You know, like, we made a mistake, but It took the courts basically a year, to decide that this was unfair and that they're going to have to force a by-election. This is what I mean. The Liberals don't respect democracy.
And thank goodness for the court system. They are the last bastion of holding government to account. And what I would say is that I wish it worked faster. I wish it went faster. Like the court system should have done an injunction, should have said nobody goes to that seat until this is actually decided, and they didn't. And unfortunately, this is where we're at a year out. But it just actually totally nullifies the aisle crossers, and basically, puts Carney farther away from his majority. So more and more inclined to believe that there will be, an election at some point. But this is, again, it just flies in the face of democracy, flies in the face of what the electorate wanted. And there should have been a by-election done a year ago. And instead, here we are a year later, having had an MP that was in the House, at least only for a very short amount of time, because they didn't really sit a whole lot last year. But having said that, definitely, should have been dealt with earlier.
And how did the media cover it? Oh, well, how's Mark Carney going to have to get more seats now? It didn't talk about the affront to democracy. It didn't talk about how this should never have happened. That's what I mean. That the media, the government, the ones at the bowl there that are taking from the government need to go. They all need to be defunded. They've proven themselves unworthy. They've been weighed and measured, and they've come up short.
Yeah, we need to seriously rethink things and have a better court system that's going to actually hold them to account. Better media that doesn't get funded by them, so that they can actually be more independent. And I think in doing so, just those two little tweaks, I think we would have a more transparent and a more a robust political system that would be more beholden to its citizens.
Well, that's it for today. We're back next week. Like, share, subscribe to be on the ballot, the best news commentary show, the political commentary show on the internet by far. So if you could like, share, subscribe, and get this out to a much wider audience, we would appreciate that. And we're looking forward to the BC Conservative Party leadership debate, and that we're going to do a lot more on that when that comes up. Is it February 15th when they make when the money, or when we get
we should find out very quickly who is greenlit and who isn't.
Yeah, we'll find out, and we'll get that back to you. All right, thank you for watching Now Media.